March 15, 2024. Charlie Noris had faced down angry bulls for 30 years. Never once had he seen murder in their eyes. The 2,000-pound Brahma charged him in his own barn. Horns down, muscles coiled like steel cables. Charlie dove left, not fast enough. The impact sent him flying into the wooden wall, ribs cracking, vision blurring. The bull pinned him there, breathing hot rage against his face. That's when Charlie saw it. Carved deep into the animal's black hide, numbers, a date burned into flesh. The same date his brother Tommy died on that movie set 15 years ago. Someone had sent him a message. Someone who knew what really happened that night in the desert when the cameras stopped rolling and the lies began. The bull stepped back, studying him with intelligence that chilled Charlie's blood. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Charlie's breath came in short, painful gasps as the bull's massive head tilted, studying him like a predator sizing up wounded prey. Those dark eyes held an intelligence that made his skin crawl. This wasn't the blind fury of a spooked animal. This was calculated. The carved numbers on the bull's flank were crude but deliberate. 10.23.9. 15 years, 4 months, and 23 days since Tommy's body was found twisted beneath an overturned stunt car in the Mojave, his neck snapped clean. The official report called it equipment failure. Charlie had never questioned it, until now. The bull snorted, hot breath washing over Charlie's face as it pressed closer. Pain shot through his ribs with every shallow breath. His right arm hung useless, probably dislocated from the impact. The barn wall behind him groaned under the pressure. "Easy," he whispered, the same voice he'd used to calm spooked horses during his rodeo days. "Easy, big fella." The bull's ear twitched. Recognition flickered in those intelligent eyes, and Charlie felt his blood turn to ice water. He knew this animal, the white patch on the forehead shaped like a lightning bolt, the way it favored its left rear hoof. This was Thunder Creek's Judgment Day, a legendary bull from the professional circuit, one that had ended more careers than any other animal in rodeo history. Charlie had ridden him once, only once. The 8-second buzzer had felt like 8 hours. That was 22 years ago. This bull should be dead by now. Judgment Day stepped back, releasing the pressure but keeping those predatory eyes locked on Charlie's face. The message was clear. I could kill you, but that's not why I'm here. Charlie slumped against the splintered wood, trying to process what he was seeing. Someone had brought a bull that should be long dead to his remote ranch outside Amarillo. Someone who knew about Tommy. Someone who had carved the date of his brother's death into living flesh. The barn door creaked in the evening wind, and Judgment Day's head swiveled toward the sound. In that moment of distraction, Charlie saw his chance. The pitchfork leaning against the hay bales was maybe 6 feet away. If he could reach it with his good arm, the bull's gaze snapped back to him, and Charlie froze. Those eyes seemed to read his thoughts. "What do you want?" Charlie's voice cracked like a teenager's. "Who sent you?" Judgment Day pawed the ground once, twice. Then, impossibly, the massive animal turned and walked toward the open barn door. At the threshold, it stopped and looked back, waiting. Charlie remained pressed against the wall, hardly daring to breathe. The bull wanted him to follow. The realization hit him like another charge. This wasn't just about delivering a message. This was an invitation, or a trap. Minutes passed before Charlie finally pushed himself away from the wall. His ribs screamed in protest, and his right arm hung limp, but he could move. Through the barn door, he could see Judgment Day standing in the center of his pasture, silhouetted against the dying Texas sun. Charlie's farmhouse sat 100 yards away, porch light already flickering on automatically. His cell phone was charging on the kitchen counter. He could call Sheriff Rodriguez, report a dangerous animal on his property. Animal control would come out, tranquilize the bull, haul it away. But the carved date burned in his mind. 10/23.9. For 15 years, Charlie had lived with the guilt. He'd coordinated the stunts on Desert Thunder, the B-movie western that was supposed to launch Tommy's acting career. Charlie had checked the rigging himself, approved the car modifications, given the green light for the night shoot. When the stunt went wrong and Tommy died, Charlie had walked away from Hollywood forever. The producers had been sympathetic, generous even. They'd covered Tommy's funeral expenses, helped Charlie buy this ranch, never pressed charges despite the obvious negligence. Their lawyers had handled everything quietly, efficiently. No lawsuits, no media circus. Just a tragic accident that everyone agreed was best forgotten. Charlie had spent 15 years believing their kindness was genuine. Now, watching a bull that should be dead stand vigil in his pasture, he wondered what else he'd been wrong about. His satellite dish caught the last rays of sunlight from its perch on the barn roof, 47 channels of nothing, but it connected him to the outside world. Most nights, that felt like too much connection. Tonight, staring at Judgment Day's imposing silhouette, Charlie felt completely alone. The carved numbers seemed to pulse behind his eyelids. 10/23/9. Not just the date Tommy died, but the date Charlie's life had ended too. He'd been a ghost for 15 years, hiding from the world, hiding from the guilt. Someone wanted him to remember. Someone wanted him to question everything he thought he knew about that night in the desert. Judgment Day's message was clear. The past wasn't buried as deep as Charlie had hoped. And whoever had sent the bull wasn't finished with him yet. The game was just beginning. Before we dive deeper into Charlie's nightmare, drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever had your past come back to haunt you? And make sure you're following along, because tomorrow's chapter reveals who's really been watching Charlie all these years. Charlie stumbled toward the farmhouse, each step sending fresh waves of agony through his ribs. The porch light cast long shadows across the weathered boards where he'd spent countless evenings nursing whiskey and watching storms roll across the Texas plains. Home, the only sanctuary he'd known for 15 years. Inside, the familiar creak of floorboards under his boots brought no comfort tonight. The kitchen still smelled like morning coffee and the bacon he'd fried for breakfast, back when his biggest worry was whether the north pasture fence needed mending, a lifetime ago. His cell phone sat on the scratched Formica counter, screen dark. Charlie reached for it with his good hand, then stopped. Who would he call? Sheriff Rodriguez would ask questions Charlie couldn't answer. Doc Hensley would want to examine his injuries, fill out reports. The fewer people who knew about Judgment Day, the better. Instead, Charlie pulled a bottle of bourbon from the cabinet above the sink. His reflection in the window looked like hell, graying stubble, lines etched deep around his eyes, blood seeping through his torn shirt. At 58, he looked every day of it and more. Tommy would have been 45 now, probably with kids of his own, maybe even grandkids for their parents to spoil. Their parents, gone 6 years now in a car wreck outside Lubbock. They died still believing Charlie was responsible for their youngest son's death. Dad had never said it outright, but the disappointment in his eyes spoke volumes. Mom had tried to bridge the gap, calling every Sunday until the cancer took her voice away. Charlie had been the one to turn off her life support, making that final decision alone because he was all the family left. The bourbon burned going down, but not enough to erase the image of Judgment Day's intelligent eyes. Bulls didn't live 22 years. Hell, most rodeo bulls were retired by 15, living out their days in comfortable pastures if they were lucky. The best ones became breeding stock. Their legendary genetics passed on to the next generation of bone breakers. Through the kitchen window, Charlie could see the bull's dark shape in the pasture, motionless, waiting. On the refrigerator, a photograph caught his eye, one of the few he'd kept from the old days. Him and Tommy at the Houston rodeo, maybe 5 years before everything went to hell. Tommy was grinning at the camera, 22 years old and invincible, wearing a pearl snap shirt and his lucky belt buckle. Charlie stood beside him, lean and confident, his arm around his little brother's shoulders. They'd been inseparable then. Tommy had followed Charlie into rodeo, then into stunt work, trusting his older brother's judgment completely. "I'll take care of you, kid," Charlie had promised their mother the day they left for Hollywood. "Won't let anything happen to him." The photo's edges were curled with age, corners soft from handling. Charlie had stared at it so many nights, replaying every decision that led to that desert highway outside Barstow. Every choice that put Tommy behind the wheel of a rigged car that should have been safe. A sound from outside made him freeze, the low rumble of an engine on his private road. Charlie killed the kitchen light and peered through the curtain. Headlights cut through the darkness, still half a mile out but approaching fast. He wasn't expecting visitors. Never had visitors. His Winchester hung on pegs above the fireplace in the living room, cleaned and loaded out of habit more than necessity. Charlie had always been careful about security. 15 years of isolation bred paranoia. The engine sound grew closer, and he caught the distinct rumble of a diesel truck. Charlie grabbed the rifle and moved to the front window. Through the gap in the curtains, he watched a black pickup truck roll to a stop near his porch. No markings, no license plate visible from this angle. The engine died, but nobody got out. The truck just sat there, idling in the darkness. His landline phone sat on the side table, red light blinking with a message he hadn't noticed before. Charlie picked up the receiver and dialed voicemail, rifle balanced across his knees. "You have one new message. First message." Static crackled, then a voice he didn't recognize, gravelly, older, with a slight accent he couldn't place. "Hello, Charlie. You've met my messenger by now, I expect. That bull cost me considerable effort to find, considerable money to transport. But some conversations require the proper introduction, don't they? Check your email. We have business to discuss. Business about your brother." The line went dead. Charlie's hands shook as he set down the phone. His laptop sat dusty on the kitchen table. He rarely used it except to order supplies or check cattle prices. The truck outside remained motionless, its occupants waiting. Judgment Day snorted in the pasture, the sound carrying through the still night air. The past wasn't just knocking on Charlie's door anymore. It had kicked the door down and made itself at home. 15 years of quiet were over. The game was escalating. Charlie's finger hesitated over the laptop's power button. The machine hummed to life with agonizing slowness, its ancient processor grinding through startup sequences while the diesel truck waited outside like a mechanical predator. Through the window, he could see two silhouettes in the cab, driver and passenger, both motionless. The Wi-Fi icon flickered as his satellite internet crawled to life. One new email sat in his inbox, the sender listed simply as producer. No name, no company. Just that single, loaded word that made Charlie's blood run cold. He clicked it open. "Charlie, 2 years ago, you rode Judgment Day for 8 seconds and walked away a hero. 15 years ago, your brother didn't walk away at all. Time we discussed the connection." Attached, you'll find some photographs from October 23, 2009. Notice the timestamps. Notice what the official investigation missed. Notice who was there, who shouldn't have been. Your guilt has been a useful tool, but the game has changed. Someone's been asking questions about Desert Thunder, the wrong kind of questions. We need to talk before those questions find their way to the wrong people. The men outside are insurance. Cooperation ensures they remain friendly. Check the attachments, then come outside. We'll take a drive down memory lane. Vincent Torelli. Charlie stared at the signature. Vincent Torelli. The name hit him like a physical blow, dragging him back to smoky production meetings and handshake deals that felt too good to be true. Torelli had been the executive producer on Desert Thunder, the man with the money and connections who'd made Tommy's big break possible. After the accident, he'd disappeared into the Hollywood machine, just another suit Charlie never expected to see again. His hands trembled as he clicked the first attachment. A photograph filled the screen, the Desert Thunder set in the Mojave, taken by someone with a telephoto lens. The timestamp read 10:47 p.m., October 23, 2009, 17 minutes before Tommy's stunt run. In the foreground, Tommy stood beside the modified stunt car, his face animated as he talked to someone out of frame. But in the background, barely visible in the shadows between two equipment trailers, Charlie could see himself, except he remembered being in the catering tent at 10:47, reviewing the shot list one final time. The second photo showed the same scene from a different angle. Now Charlie could see his own face clearly, and the face of the man he was talking to. Marcus Webb, the film's stunt coordinator, the man who'd taken over Charlie's job 3 days into production after a heated argument with the director. Charlie remembered that argument. Webb had wanted to skip safety checks, push the schedule, cut corners. Charlie had refused and been fired on the spot. Tommy had begged him to stay, but Charlie's pride had been wounded. He'd packed his gear and driven back to Texas, leaving his little brother in Webb's hands. The timestamp on this photo read 9:23 p.m. an hour and 24 minutes before the accident. But Webb was supposed to be in the hospital. He'd been rushed to emergency surgery that morning after a crane collapse on set. Charlie had received a frantic call from Tommy around noon. Webb was unconscious, multiple injuries, the shoot was in chaos. The insurance company had insisted Charlie return to coordinate Tommy's stunt. That's why he'd been there that night. That's why the guilt had eaten him alive for 15 years. If Webb was on set at 9:23 p.m., he'd never been in the hospital at all. The third attachment was a medical record. Marcus Webb, admitted to Barstow General Hospital at 11:43 p.m. on October 23, 2009, 23 minutes after Tommy's car had rolled and burst into flames. Admitted for treatment of injuries sustained in an industrial accident. Not the morning of the 23rd. The night of the 23rd. After Tommy died. Charlie's vision blurred as the pieces clicked into place. The hospital story had been a lie. Webb had been there all along, working in the shadows while Charlie took responsibility for the safety protocols. Someone had wanted Charlie on set that night. Someone had needed him there to take the blame when everything went wrong. A sharp rap on the front door made him jump. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate, patient but insistent. Through the window he could see the truck's driver standing on his porch, a lean man in an expensive suit that looked out of place in rural Texas. The passenger remained in the cab, probably armed. "Mr. Noris." The voice was cultured, professional, not threatening, but carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Mr. Torelli would like a word. He's waited 15 years for this conversation. I think you've waited long enough too." Charlie's rifle felt heavy in his hands. Useless, really. These weren't the kind of men you could shoot your way out of dealing with. They were the kind who owned judges, bought silence, made problems disappear into the desert. The kind who could fake medical records and orchestrate accidents. The kind who'd been pulling Charlie's strings since the night his brother died. Outside, Judgment Day let out a low bellow that carried across the pasture like a warning, or maybe a funeral dirge. The game wasn't escalating anymore. Charlie was finally seeing it for what it had always been. Charlie set the laptop aside and rose slowly from the kitchen table, his rifle trembling in his grip. Every instinct screamed at him to barricade the door, call for help, disappear into the Texas night. But 15 years of running had led him here, to this moment, this reckoning he'd never seen coming. "Just need a minute," Charlie called through the door, his voice steadier than he felt. The suited man on his porch said nothing, but his patience felt rehearsed, professional. Charlie's mind raced through possibilities. The back door led to open pasture, but Judgment Day stood between him and any real escape route. His truck sat in the barn, keys hanging on the hook by the kitchen window. If he could reach it without being seen, maybe make it to Sheriff Rodriguez in town. But the photographs burned in his memory. If Torelli had orchestrated Tommy's death, if he commanded the resources to fake medical records and manipulate Charlie for 15 years, what was a small-town sheriff going to do? What was anyone going to do? "Mr. Noris, we're not going anywhere." The voice carried a hint of amusement now. "Mr. Torelli simply wants to talk. You've been asking the wrong questions for a very long time. Time to get some answers." Wrong questions. Charlie stared at the dark screen of his laptop, remembering all those sleepless nights when he'd replayed every decision from that desert shoot. Why hadn't he double-checked the roll cage welding? Why hadn't he insisted on more safety cables? Why had he let pride keep him away from set when Tommy needed him most? He'd been asking why he'd failed. He should have been asking who wanted him to fail. The refrigerator hummed in the silence. Outside, Judgment Day moved through the pasture with surprising grace for such a massive animal, patrolling the perimeter like a prison guard. The bull's presence wasn't random intimidation. It was a reminder, a symbol of the life Charlie had abandoned, the risks he'd taken, the 8 seconds of glory that had led him to believe he could keep Tommy safe in Hollywood. Someone had studied Charlie's psychology for 15 years. Someone knew exactly which strings to pull. His cell phone buzzed on the counter. A text from an unknown number. The longer you wait, the more uncomfortable this becomes for everyone. Vincent is a patient man, but his associates are practical. Through the front window, Charlie could see the passenger had stepped out of the truck. Bigger than the first man, hands clasped behind his back in a relaxed pose that somehow felt more threatening than drawn guns. Professional muscle, the kind that solved problems quietly and efficiently. Charlie's hands shook as he set down the rifle. The weapon was worse than useless. It was a liability that would escalate a situation he couldn't control. These men weren't here to hurt him. They were here because Vincent Torelli needed something, and dead men couldn't provide whatever that was. But the need for answers burned stronger than fear now. For 15 years, Charlie had carried Tommy's death like a stone in his chest, the weight of it crushing every moment of joy, every possibility of peace. If there was even a chance that weight belonged to someone else. He walked to the front door and turned the deadbolt. The suited man stepped back politely as Charlie emerged onto his porch, the October night air sharp with the scent of impending rain. "Mr. Noris." The man nodded with genuine respect. "Thank you. This won't take long." Up close, Charlie could see the man was older than he'd first appeared, maybe 60, with silver threading through his dark hair. His suit was tailored, expensive, but he wore it like work clothes rather than costume. This wasn't Hollywood flash. This was East Coast money, old connections, institutional power. "You said Torelli wants to talk," Charlie managed. "About what?" "About the questions someone's been asking. About Desert Thunder. About your brother." The man's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Concern? Warning? Someone's been digging into the production records, the insurance claims, the accident reports. Someone with resources and motivation. "Mr. Torelli feels you have a right to know who and why." Charlie's mouth went dry. "Who's asking questions?" "Someone who believes your brother's death wasn't an accident. Someone who's gotten very close to proving it." The man gestured toward the truck. "The conversation you need to have can't happen here. Too many variables, too much exposure. Mr. Torelli has arranged a more private setting. What if I refuse?" The man looked genuinely pained by the question. "Mr. Noris, with respect, you stopped having that option the moment the first photograph was taken in 2009. You've been part of this story for 15 years. The only choice now is whether you learn the ending as a participant or a victim." In the pasture, Judgment Day raised his massive head and bellowed into the night, a sound that carried across the empty land like a judgment indeed. Charlie stared at the suited man, processing the implications of what he'd just heard. Someone else was investigating Tommy's death, someone with resources. For 15 years, Charlie had believed he was the only one who cared enough to torment himself with what-ifs and should-haves. Now he discovered he'd been asking the wrong questions while someone else had been asking the right ones. "Get in the truck, Charlie." The bigger man had moved closer, his voice carrying the flat authority of someone accustomed to compliance. "Mr. Torelli's waiting." Charlie's legs felt unsteady as he stepped off the porch. The gravel crunched under his boots like breaking bones. In the distance, Judgment Day's dark silhouette moved through the shadows, and Charlie wondered if this was what prey felt like, surrounded, herded, with nowhere left to run. The truck's interior smelled of leather and gun oil. Charlie found himself wedged between the two men, watching his ranch disappear in the side mirror. 15 years he'd built this sanctuary, this quiet place where the past couldn't touch him. Now it felt like a stage set, artificial as any Hollywood production. "Where are we going?" Charlie asked as they turned onto the main highway. "Somewhere you can hear the truth without interruption," the driver replied. His hands were steady on the wheel, professional. "Mr. Torelli has a lot to explain." They drove in silence through the empty Texas landscape, past darkened farmhouses and sleeping cattle. Charlie tried to memorize landmarks, but the night blurred past like a fever dream. His mind kept returning to those photographs, to Marcus Webb's face in the shadows where he shouldn't have been. 15 years of self-torture, and the real architect of Tommy's death had been hiding in plain sight. The truck turned off the highway onto a dirt road that wound through scrub brush and mesquite trees. No signs, no mailboxes. Private property, the kind where screams wouldn't carry. Charlie's mouth went dry, but he forced himself to stay calm. If they'd wanted him dead, there were easier ways than this elaborate charade. After 20 minutes of dust and darkness, lights appeared ahead. A small ranch house, modest but well-maintained, with vehicles parked in a neat line. Too neat, too organized. This wasn't someone's home, it was a meeting place, chosen for its isolation and discretion. "End of the line," the bigger man said as they pulled to a stop. Inside, the house felt like a corporate safe room. Expensive furniture, but nothing personal. No photographs, no mementos. Just the tools of serious conversation. Recording equipment on a side table, documents spread across a polished conference table, and Vincent Torelli himself standing by the fireplace like he owned the world. Torelli had aged well for a man in his 70s. Silver-haired, lean, wearing casual clothes that probably cost more than Charlie's truck. But his eyes were the same, calculating, patient, missing nothing. The eyes of a man who measured other people's weaknesses and filed the information away for later use. "Charlie." Torelli's voice carried genuine warmth, as if they were old friends meeting for coffee. "You look like hell. 15 years of guilt will do that to a man. You should know." Charlie remained standing, every muscle tense. "You put it there." "Did I?" Torelli gestured to a chair across from the conference table. "Sit down, Charlie. Let me tell you what really happened that night. Let me tell you why your brother had to die." The words hit Charlie like physical blows. Had to die. Not accident, not miscalculation, not even criminal negligence. Murder, premeditated and planned. Charlie's legs gave out and he collapsed into the offered chair, the weight of 15 years crashing down on him. Tommy stumbled onto something he shouldn't have seen, Torelli continued, settling into his own chair with the satisfied air of a predator finally revealing its teeth. Financial irregularities. Money that didn't add up. He was young, idealistic, thought he could be a hero, thought he could expose the whole operation. What operation? Charlie's voice came out as a whisper. Insurance fraud, to start with. Inflated budgets, staged accidents, claims that netted far more than any movie could earn at the box office. Desert Thunder was supposed to be a controlled loss, a tax write-off with profitable side benefits. Tommy's accident was just supposed to delay production, create insurance opportunities. But your brother knew too much, asked too many questions. Charlie's hands clenched into fists. "So you killed him." "We defended ourselves," Torelli corrected. "And we protected you. Do you think it was coincidence that Marcus Webb's accident got you called back to set that night? Do you think your guilt was an unfortunate side effect?" He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Charlie, your remorse was the point. A grieving brother, consumed by responsibility, makes a perfect witness, a perfect patsy. Who's going to question the man who blames himself?" The room spun around Charlie as the full scope of his manipulation became clear. Every sleepless night, every bottle of bourbon, every moment of crushing self-hatred, all of it orchestrated, all of it planned. "But now someone's asking questions," Torelli said softly. "Someone who might expose everything we've built." Charlie's breath caught in his throat. The casual way Torelli spoke of Tommy's murder, the clinical precision of 15 years of psychological manipulation, it crystallized into a rage so pure it felt like ice in his veins. "Who?" The word came out as a growl. "Who's asking questions?" Torelli smiled, but something flickered behind his eyes, a crack in the facade. "Your brother's girlfriend, Sarah Chen. Turns out she never believed the official story." The name hit Charlie like a freight train. Sarah, the film student who'd been working as Tommy's script supervisor, the quiet girl with dark eyes who'd loved his brother with fierce devotion. Charlie had seen her at the funeral, standing apart from the Hollywood crowd, her grief raw and real while everyone else performed their condolences. "Sarah's been digging for 15 years, Torelli continued. Started as a graduate thesis on film industry safety standards. Became something more obsessive. She's accumulated quite a collection of evidence, production records, witness statements, financial documents that certain people worked very hard to bury." "Good for her." Charlie's voice was steady now, filled with something he hadn't felt in 15 years. "Purpose. Hope she burns you all to the ground." "Oh, Charlie." Torelli's smile widened. "You still don't understand. Sarah didn't just send you those photographs. She didn't deliver that bull to your ranch." He leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment. "We did." The words didn't make sense. Charlie stared at Torelli, his mind struggling to process the implication. "What?" Sarah's been getting close. Too close. Her investigation was about to expose not just Tommy's murder, but the entire network we've built since then. dozens of productions, hundreds of millions in fraudulent claims. A system that's kept very powerful people very wealthy for a very long time. Torelli spread his hands like a magician revealing a trick. We needed her to stop digging, and we knew exactly how to break her spirit. Understanding crept through Charlie like poison. You wanted me to find her. You wanted me to destroy her credibility, yes. The grief-stricken brother, driven to paranoid delusions by guilt and isolation. Who would believe her theories once you started making wild accusations, threatening her, maybe even getting violent? Torelli's eyes glittered with satisfaction. Your guilt has been our insurance policy for 15 years, Charlie. Your breakdown was going to be our final dividend. Charlie felt something shift inside his chest, like tectonic plates rearranging themselves. The weight he'd carried for so long, the crushing responsibility for Tommy's death, began to transform into something else entirely, something harder and infinitely more dangerous. There's just one problem with your plan, Charlie said quietly. Oh, what's that? You told me the truth. Charlie met Torelli's gaze directly for the first time. You couldn't resist explaining how clever you've been, how perfectly you've manipulated me. You needed me to understand that I'm not Tommy's killer. I'm just another one of your victims. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Torelli's face. It doesn't matter what you know now. You're here, alone, with no evidence and no backup. Sarah's investigation dies with her credibility, and you, he gestured to the men flanking Charlie, you'll have a terrible accident. Guilt-driven suicide, perhaps. Very tragic, very believable. Charlie almost smiled. You really think I came here alone? I know you did. We've been watching you for weeks. Then you missed Sheriff Rodriguez's deputies positioned on the access road. You missed the wire I'm wearing. And you definitely missed the federal agent Sarah Chen contacted when she realized someone was using her investigation to manipulate me. Charlie's voice carried the ring of absolute conviction. See, Vincent, Sarah didn't just send those photographs to me. She sent them to a lot of people, including some very interested parties at the FBI. The lie came so naturally, so smoothly, that for a moment Charlie almost believed it himself. But he could see it landing like a physical blow in Torelli's eyes, the first seed of doubt, the possibility that his perfect plan had a fatal flaw. Torelli's hand moved toward his jacket, but Charlie was already rising from his chair, 15 years of suppressed rage finally finding its target. But most importantly, you arrogant son of a bitch, you told me my brother died a hero. Tommy wasn't a victim of my incompetence. He was murdered for trying to do the right thing. The room erupted in motion, but Charlie's mind was crystal clear for the first time in 15 years. He wasn't the broken man who'd driven out here tonight. He wasn't the guilt-ridden hermit who'd spent a decade and a half punishing himself for crimes he didn't commit. He was Tommy Noris's big brother, and he had work to do. Charlie's chair crashed backward as he lunged across the table, 15 years of rodeo reflexes and suppressed fury exploding into motion. His hands found Torelli's throat before the old man could draw whatever weapon he'd been reaching for. They went down together, scattering documents and overturning the recording equipment. Charlie, stop. The bigger man was moving, but Charlie had positioned himself perfectly, Torelli's body between him and the muscle, using the producer as a human shield while his fingers tightened around the thin neck. You want to know what Tommy's last words were? Charlie snarled, his face inches from Torelli's. The old man's eyes bulged, hands clawing ineffectively at Charlie's wrists. He said Charlie will figure it out. Not tell Charlie I'm sorry or tell Charlie it wasn't his fault. He said I'd figure it out, and you know what, Vincent? I finally did. The driver had circled around, trying for a clean angle, but Charlie rolled with Torelli toward the fireplace, keeping the man's body between himself and any potential shots. His rodeo training kicked in, 8 seconds of staying on, reading the animal's movements, anticipating the next move. The wire, remember? Charlie called out to the advancing men, every word being recorded, every threat being documented. You want to add assaulting a federal witness to your murder charges? It was still a bluff, but doubt flickered across their faces. That hesitation was all Charlie needed. He released Torelli and rolled toward the fireplace, grabbing a heavy brass poker as the old man gasped and wheezed on the expensive carpet. Tommy was 24 years old, Charlie said, rising to his feet with the makeshift weapon in his hands. Had his whole life ahead of him. A girl who loved him, dreams of changing how movies got made, making them safer for the people who risked their lives to create magic. His voice cracked with emotion held in check for 15 years. And you killed him for money. Torelli struggled to his knees, one hand massaging his throat. When he spoke, his voice was a hoarse rasp. You think this changes anything? You think righteous anger makes you bulletproof? Charlie's grip tightened on the poker. But knowing Tommy died trying to do the right thing changes everything. For 15 years, I've been asking myself what I could have done different. Now I know what I'm going to do next. The driver took a step forward, gun finally drawn but held low. Charlie, you're outnumbered. Whatever you're thinking... I'm thinking about Sarah Chen, Charlie interrupted. 15 years she's been fighting for my brother while I was wallowing in guilt you manufactured. 15 years she's been the only one seeking justice while I was hiding on my ranch, punishing myself for your crimes. He could feel his clarity sharpening, the fog of self-doubt that had clouded his judgment for so long finally lifting. Every decision he'd made since seeing those photographs had been reactive, defensive, driven by the guilt Torelli had so carefully cultivated. But that guilt belonged to dead men now. She deserves to know she was right, Charlie continued, backing toward the window. She deserves to know Tommy's death meant something, and she deserves to finish what he started. Torelli climbed unsteadily to his feet, his expensive clothes rumpled, his silver hair disheveled, but his eyes still held that calculating gleam. Sarah Chen is a dead woman. Even if you somehow walk out of here, which you won't, she won't live to see sunrise. We know where she is. We know how to reach her. The words hit Charlie like a physical blow. In his rush to find answers about the past, he'd endangered the one person who'd been fighting for Tommy all along, the one person who'd never stopped believing in the truth. Besides, Torelli croaked, straightening his jacket with trembling hands, what makes you think your brother was such a hero? What makes you think he wasn't just as corrupt as everyone else? Charlie went very still. What did you say? Tommy didn't stumble onto our operation, Charlie. He was part of it. Until he got greedy. Until he decided he wanted a bigger cut and threatened to expose us if we didn't pay. Torelli's smile returned, cruel and triumphant. Your brother was a blackmailer. His death wasn't about justice. It was about honor among thieves. The poker slipped in Charlie's suddenly sweaty grip. You're lying. The financial records Sarah's so proud of finding? They show payments to Tommy going back months before his death. Your precious little brother wasn't trying to stop us, Charlie. He was trying to join us. And when we refused to make him a full partner... Shut up! Charlie's voice was deadly quiet. He threatened to bring everything down out of spite. So yes, we killed him, but not to silence a hero. We killed him because he was a greedy little... Charlie's world exploded into motion again, but this time the rage felt different, colder, more controlled, more dangerous. The poker whistled through the air, but Charlie pulled the swing at the last second, the brass weapon stopping inches from Torelli's skull. The old man flinched backward, stumbling over his own feet, and Charlie saw something he hadn't expected in those calculating eyes. Fear, real, honest terror. You're still lying, Charlie said, his voice carrying the quiet certainty of absolute conviction. Tommy kept records of everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every decision. Sarah would have found evidence of blackmail if it existed. But she didn't, did she? Because my brother was exactly who I thought he was. Torelli's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. The driver shifted nervously, gun still drawn but uncertain. This wasn't going according to plan. The payments you're talking about, Charlie continued, lowering the poker but keeping his grip firm, those were consultation fees. Tommy was building a case, gathering evidence from the inside. Every dollar you paid him brought you deeper into his trap. You don't know... I know, my brother. The words rang with finality. I know he called me that night not because he felt guilty, but because he needed backup. He knew what you were planning. He knew he was walking into danger. Charlie's mind was crystallizing around a new understanding. 15 years of fragmented memories suddenly forming a coherent picture. Tommy's voice on the phone that last night, not panicked or guilty, but determined, resolved, the voice of a man who'd made peace with a dangerous choice. He recorded everything, didn't he? Charlie's eyes never left Torelli's face. That's why you've been so careful all these years. Not just because of what he knew, but because of what he preserved. Evidence you could never be sure was destroyed. Torelli's facade cracked completely. Where is it? Where did he hide? That's what you've really been afraid of, Charlie pressed on. Not Sarah's investigation. Not my guilt-driven breakdown. You've been terrified that someday someone would find Tommy's insurance policy. The room fell silent except for the old man's labored breathing. Charlie could see the truth, written in every line of Torelli's face. Decades of looking over his shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop, building empire after empire on the foundation of a secret that could topple everything. Here's what's going to happen, Charlie said quietly. You're going to tell me exactly who else was involved in Tommy's murder. You're going to give me every name, every detail, every crime you've committed since then. And then you're going to pray that Sarah Chen is more forgiving than I am. And if I refuse? Charlie's smile held no warmth whatsoever. Then I stop being civilized about this. The driver took a nervous step forward. Boss, maybe we should… Vincent! Charlie's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Your man there is having second thoughts about murdering a federal witness. Smart man. Question is, are you smart enough to know when you've lost? Torelli's shoulders sagged, age and defeat finally showing in the lines of his face. You want names? Fine. Marcus Webb, obviously. Jonathan Keyes from the studio, half the insurance board. 3 senators who've been covering for us since the beginning. His voice turned bitter. Your precious brother was about to destroy dozens of careers, hundreds of millions in assets. We couldn't let that happen. But you also couldn't let him become a martyr, Charlie realized. So you made me the villain instead, the negligent brother whose guilt kept everyone from looking too closely at the circumstances. It was elegant, Torelli admitted. Your breakdown sold the cover story better than any amount of evidence tampering. Charlie felt the last pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. 15 years of self-destruction, carefully orchestrated and maintained. His isolation hadn't been self-imposed, it had been cultivated. Every time he'd tried to rebuild his life, to reconnect with friends or find purpose beyond his guilt, something had intervened. Bad luck, he'd thought. The universe's way of punishing him for Tommy's death. How? The word came out as a whisper. How did you keep me isolated all this time? Torelli's smile returned, weak but triumphant. Job opportunities that disappeared at the last minute. Relationships that soured when old friends received anonymous information about your drinking problem and violent tendencies. Even that ranch of yours, do you think it was coincidence that it became available exactly when you needed to disappear from the world? Charlie's hand tightened on the poker again. You've been controlling my entire life. We've been protecting our investment. A guilty, broken Charlie Noris was worth more to us than a dead one. You were our insurance policy against exactly this kind of situation. Torelli gestured weakly toward the scattered documents. Who would believe the paranoid accusations of a man who'd spent 15 years destroying himself with guilt? But as the words left his mouth, Charlie saw the fatal flaw in Torelli's reasoning. The old man's need to gloat, to explain his cleverness, had revealed the one thing Charlie needed to know. Sarah Chen wasn't just investigating Tommy's death. She was investigating Charlie's life since then, and if she was half as thorough as her 15-year pursuit suggested, she'd already documented the pattern of manipulation that had kept him isolated and controllable. Torelli's greatest strength, his need to demonstrate his intelligence, had become his destruction. Thank you, Charlie said simply. For what? For explaining exactly how Sarah's going to destroy you. The confidence drained from Torelli's face like water from a broken dam. Charlie could see the moment when the old man realized his mistake, that his compulsion to reveal his cleverness had given Sarah Chen everything she needed to unravel not just the murder, but the elaborate 15-year conspiracy that followed. She's been tracking the pattern, hasn't she? Charlie continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. Every interference in my life, every sabotaged relationship, every mysterious setback. You thought you were being subtle, but to someone looking for it, He shook his head, almost admiring the irony. You built a perfect trail of evidence. The driver's gun wavered. Charlie could see doubt spreading across the man's face like a contagion. Whatever loyalty money had bought, it wasn't worth federal conspiracy charges. Sir, the driver said quietly, maybe we should... Shut up, Torelli snapped. But his authority was crumbling. The carefully constructed facade of control was dissolving, revealing the desperate old man beneath. This doesn't change anything. We clean this up, disappear for a while, start over somewhere else. With what? Charlie asked. Your entire network is compromised. Every contact, every politician, every dirty deal. Sarah's documented all of it. You told me yourself how thorough she is. He took a step closer, the poker still in his hands but hanging loose now, more symbol than threat. It's over, Vincent. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of the dying fire. Charlie could smell his own sweat, could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, but for the first time in 15 years, the sensation wasn't panic, it was anticipation. The feeling of a man who'd finally stopped running from his demons and started chasing them instead. You really think she's going to save you? Torelli's voice was barely a whisper. Even if everything you're saying is true, even if we're finished, you think justice for Tommy brings you peace? You think vindication erases 15 years of guilt? The question hit harder than Charlie expected. For a moment, he was back in his barn, staring at that massive black bull, feeling the weight of failure and self-hatred that had defined his existence since Tommy died. The man who'd driven here tonight had been broken, hollowed out, barely functional. But that man was gone. Charlie said quietly, the guilt doesn't just disappear. The years I lost, the life I didn't live, that's permanent damage. Tommy's still dead. I'm still the brother who couldn't save him. He paused, searching for words that had taken 15 years to find, but guilt and responsibility aren't the same thing. You taught me that tonight. He looked directly at Torelli, seeing not the puppet master who'd controlled his life, but a frightened old man whose house of cards was finally collapsing. I can live with guilt, Charlie continued. It's honest. It's about loving someone enough that losing them leaves a permanent mark. But shame, the kind you manufactured, the kind that makes a man disappear from his own life, that was never mine to carry. The driver slowly lowered his weapon. I'm done, he announced to no one in particular. This is insane. I'm not going to federal prison for this. He backed toward the door, hands visible, moving like a man walking away from a car accident before the police arrived. The sound of his footsteps retreated down the hall, followed by the distant slam of a door. Torelli watched his last ally abandon him, his face cycling through rage, desperation, and finally resignation. You have no idea what you've unleashed, he said. The people above me, the money behind this operation, they don't forgive loose ends. Then I guess we'd better make sure there are consequences for them too, Charlie replied. Lucky for me, I know an investigative journalist who's been preparing for exactly that fight. He pulled out his phone, dialing Sarah Chen's number from memory. As it rang, he kept his eyes on Torelli, watching the old man shrink into himself with each passing second. Charlie? Sarah's voice was tense, uncertain. It's over, he said simply. Torelli confessed everything. Names, dates, the whole conspiracy. He paused, feeling the enormity of the moment. Sarah, you were right about all of it. Tommy died a hero. The sob that came through the phone was barely audible, but Charlie heard it. 15 years of vindication, of having her faith in a dead man's integrity finally proven true. Are you safe? She asked. Charlie looked around the room, at the scattered documents that would bury Torelli's empire, at the broken old man who'd controlled his life for so long, at his own hands that were finally steady. Yeah, he said, and meant it completely. I'm safe. For the first time in 15 years, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder.